Step into a world where folklore meets the supernatural, where legends come to life and mysterious tales unfold. Welcome to Memory Chronicles, where the past holds the key to unlocking the secrets of the present. Join us as we delve into the realms of myth and mystery, exploring the untold stories that linger in the shadows of history. Get ready to embark on a journey of discovery with us.
Hello, this is Memory. Oh, what's up? It's you again. Okay. I've heard a little bit about it. I could do my research and let the people know. I got it. Okay. I'm listening. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. This was your favorite legend. Oh, okay. Like every other legend. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm quiet. Okay, well, let me get on with the show. All right, thank you for calling in. Ghostly from the Friendly Past. I'll let the people know about this next folklore. Thank you. All right, bye. Welcome back, my friendlings, to the Memory Chronicles Podcast. I am your host, author, and sister friend, Memory. I'm so excited for today's episode, as you all heard from my producer and co-host, the Ghost from the Friendly Past. It is going to be a good one. Let's gather around the fire and let's get into this.
Welcome back, friendlings. I am your host, author, and sister friend, Memory. Yes. And this time around, listen, I'm always like, I get geeked. So excuse me. When I get super excited, I talk too fast and the voice, high pitch, and everything comes along. So I need to take it a little bit slow. I enjoy every single episode I talk about. But this particular one, when we start talking about CIA, the government, then I'm all ears. So we are getting into this one. This is going to be a 2-part series, y'all. And you do not want to miss part 2. Because I feel like it's only fair to break down this presentation in this manner. Because it is a government air quote project. So I feel like we need to embark on a 2-part series, right? So we're going to talk about the government project, and then on part 2, you do not want to miss it. Because on part 2, we're going to get deep down into the crevices of this project and into what is considered the successes of the project by these individuals that we will mention in part 2. And then I'm geeked because part 2 has an element in there. So now let's just take a pause to ponder real quick. Just kidding. Let's talk about this real quick. So most of my day ones, thank you so much. Those that have been rocking with me in these last 3 years of podcasting, I love you to the moon and back. Oh, infinity. Because my day ones know that I was born and raised in the country of Zimbabwe, which sits right above the country of South Africa. So our location is the south of the equator, south of Africa, but we're not South Africa. Just always have to do that breakdown. I'm used to describing it like that. So on part 2, we dive into these people's first-hand experiences with remote viewing, and Zimbabwe is mentioned in it. And it's a particular area in Zimbabwe where it's always been a phenomena. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And one of the things that got me writing historical fiction, historical fantasy, especially most of my historical fantasy manuscripts have hints and elements of folklore. Because growing up in Zimbabwe, all we did when we went to grandma's house, which was in the village, no modern day amenities, but just the fire. And that's why I start off with let's gather around the fire, because it brings me to that warm, cozy feeling of being isolated from the modern busyness of life. Even as a child out in the village, in the wilderness, there's nothing but the cackling cries of the hyenas and unknown creatures out there. And then right there in the embers of the tall fire is someone talking about folklore, legend. And one of these is like a notorious legend within our country. And we're going to talk about that on part 2 of remote viewing and the folks that have actually succeeded in remote viewing. So you don't want to miss part 2. So it is only fair for me as the narrator of this episode and podcast to talk to you about the part 1 and to bring in the players of this in part 1, and then we get into the meat and potatoes in part 2. So today we're going to start talking about this. Part 1 is part 1 of The Psychic Spies, Unveiling the Legend of the Secret World of Remote Viewing. The Psychic Spies, Unveiling the Legend of the secret world of remote viewing. So in layman's terms, remote viewing is when you are allegedly supposed to be using ESP. So it's been a mixed bag in feelings about remote viewing. Some say that we are all born with this psychic ability that needs to be honed or perhaps fostered or perhaps birthed in some way or the other. It needs to be coached out into existence. And some say that this is a quality that's found within a select people, a select group of people. Remote viewing has been described as the ability to see objects and things in a distant area. So remote viewing can also be described as being able to translate within this real time what you may perhaps see in a location. I'm in Missouri, so sitting here in my podcasting studio, aka home, is the ability for me to be able to see something that may be happening in real time in California, or let's say in New York, and let's go further, perhaps overseas, somewhere in the United Kingdom or somewhere in Africa. Remote viewing has been attributed as something that the government took, and when I say government, I'm talking about a branch of the United States government, such as the CIA. It came into the forefront as something they were interested in because it posed as an advantage, right? Psychic spies, hence the topic. So it poses as an advantage. Think about it. If one's country can successfully hone information from individuals, perhaps pertaining to enemies, then there is an advantage to be had by this institute, because then not only are you able to see what the enemy is trying to do or hiding or what they're up to, but it poses as an advantage point on how the said organization can conduct themselves and or protect themselves from harms and dangers from enemies. So this first part, we're going to dive into the background of remote viewing, who came up with remote viewing. And even in modern day, people believe that if you practice, if you rehearse, you too have the ability to remote viewing. Some people say you take a pencil, and a drawing pad or just a blank canvas, right? Some people say you go into that meditative state, or you close your eyes, think about what you want to think about and draw it out. But now you have to follow up with it and see what it all means. But nevertheless, it is just all an exciting concept and all exciting, intriguing at the same time. Part 2 is going to shed a light. I'm particularly always interested in things, all things, but historical things and most things that are mysterious. Hence the supernatural aspect of this podcast. But I'm always interested in also things that the government was allegedly, loosely using past tense, interested in. So let's get into it. Let's find out what remote viewing is all about. But you don't want to miss part 2 after this. And part 2 will be uploaded as a separate episode as well. So in this part 1, we are peeling back the layers of this electrifying and controversial phenomenon known as remote viewing / ESP. We're going to prepare ourselves to dive headfirst into this tale of mystery, intrigue, and contention that has captivated minds and sparked debates. Remote viewing, often abbreviated as RV, tantalizes the imagination with the claim that it taps into the mind's hidden psychic potential. Proponents swear by the ability to glimpse distant or hidden subjects, from people and places to events and objects, all without leaving the comfort of one's mind. The concept burst into the limelight thanks to physicists Russell Targ and Harold Pothoff at the Stanford Research Institute. Drawing its first modern breaths into a riveting 1971 experiment proposed by Ingo Swann. And hold on to Ingo Swann's name because he comes into play in part 2. At the American Society of Research in New York City. But don't be fooled by the grand origins. Remote viewing has never had an easy ride. Critics, armed with skepticism and cold logic, argue that the early RV experiments lacked the rigorous scientific standards needed for validation. This relegated RV to the controversial and shady corners of pseudoscience, raising eyebrows and inciting fiery debates. And I like to describe it as when the science community was going toe to toe, blow for blow. May the best man or woman win respectfully to the science community. But the plot thickens. In 1990s, with the unsealing of documents from the ostensibly clandestine Stargate project. Now, I want to also make mention that, granted, in the 1990s, it's revealed that it's Stargate project or Project Stargate. But this is not to be confused with Star/Gate. Trust and believe. Talk about confusion. Because as we dive deeper into remote viewing, understanding that it then became a government project, it has morphed. It was known as the Gondola Wish. Then it was Project Grill Flame. Then Project Center Lane. Project Sunstreak. And then they did have Star/Gate. But once again, we came down to the finale, which is Project Stargate, which is one word. Talk about trying to confuse some people, right? However, this Stargate project was a $20 million U.S. government gamble on the military applications of this psychic phenomena. Launched in 1975, this audacious program ended in 1995. It's swan song sung by the ultimate revelation. Remote viewers consistently, allegedly failed to deliver actionable intelligence, sealing the project's fate. But I find it interesting that it launched in 1975 and went all the way to 1995. Sidebar, do government projects ever really get dissolved or do they get better? That's the inner thoughts going on.
Are you out of your mind?
To truly appreciate remote viewing saga, let's rewind the clock. In the annals of occult and spiritualist lore, RV-like abilities were whispered about under names like telesthesia, in traveling clairvoyance. Notables like Rosemary Gully spoke of seeing remote or hidden objects with an inner eye, often intertwined with out-of-body experiences. Even during the 19th century, scientific luminaries such as Michael Faraday and Alfred Russel Wallace dared to tread these murky waters, conducting tests on purported physics. Though some tantalizing results emerged, they were dismissed as insufficiency scientific by a skeptical majority. The 1930s saw J.B. Rhine adopt more standardized methods to probe paranormal phenomena. But his reticence to trumpet his findings reflected the era's pervasive fear of scientific ridicule. Fast forward to the swinging 60s and 70s, when countercultural movements and New Age philosophies revived interest in the paranormal, giving psychic research a new lease on life.
A few moments later,
as remote viewing began to bask in the faint glimmer of mainstream interest, the early 1970s saw the emergence of Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ at the Stanford Research Institute. Their ambitious studies, initially funded by organizations like the Parapsychology Foundation and the Institute of Noetic Sciences, sought to legitimize remote viewing. Despite their fervor, not all their adventures bore fruit. Psychic Matthew Manning, subjected to remote viewing tests by physicists John Taylor and Eduardo Blavatsky in the late 1970s, struck out completely, casting further shade on the phenomenon's credibility.
oh my God!
Not all was dismissal. Some experiments seemed promising but came under fire for leaking subtle clues to participants. Once these clues were cut out, the magic often fizzled away, casting a shadow on earlier successes and amplifying doubts. Amidst the tempest of skepticism, the Stargate project emerged as the closest thing to a government-sponsored plunge into the psychic unknown. Yet, despite an almost mystical allure, the data produced was largely vague and non-specific, offering little off value to intelligence operations. Allegedly, till we get to part 2. In the 1990s, a tidal wave of skepticism swept through government ranks. The Military Intelligence Board, the DIA, the Army, with critically appraising the operational utility of the remote viewing efforts. Funding dried up in 1994, and by 1995, the project was allegedly shuffled off to the CIA, where an evaluation by the American Institutes for Research promptly led to its termination. Was it really terminated? I'm just asking for a friend. As the curtain fell on Stargate project, one thing became clear. Remote viewing had left an indelible mark on both the government psyche and public imagination. Despite its failings, even prestigious institutions like the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, PAIR, couldn't escape the gravitational pull of RV's allure, producing continuous claims of statistical success, though many critics cried foul. And we know who those critics are, respectfully to the science community, pointing out methodological flaws. The tale doesn't end there. Despite repeated efforts to tighten experimental controls, including new judging methodologies to stomp out human biases. Lingering doubts hung over the field. The scientific community's consensus was largely unswayed. Remote viewings, inconsistency, and lack of reliable replication left it adrift in the realm of pseudoscience. Notable skeptics, including Gary Martin, Michael, and Terence Hines, vociferously critiqued RV, describing it as more a fool's gold than scientific discovery. They noted much of the early research was riddled with flaws, and that positive results were often the product of unintentional sensory leaks. These critiques prompted a closer inspection of the experimental setups used by notable figures like Targ Puthoff, revealing gaping holes. Now, as we follow the story, remember Targ Puthoff, the founding alleged fathers of this here remote viewing, right, from the Stanford Research Institute. Follow them. So what these people are saying is they're trying to say, and respectfully, that's their observation. This is science versus, if you ask me, supernatural. And so they're trying to say that, listen, Targ and Puthoff were out here cooking the books. That's what they're trying to say. And that their stuff is inconclusive, and
don't you dare.
What we're doing with our scientific data collection is not adding up to the founding evidence from Targ and Puthoff. So let's take, for instance, the investigations that were done by David Marks and Richard Kamen, who set up to replicate Targ and Puthoff's work. Their findings were a bombshell. High hit rates in remote viewing were less about psychic prowess and more about cryptic cues embedded in the experiment itself, like dates and mentions of previous targets that helped participants unwittingly cheat. Once these cues were scrupulously stripped away, success rates plummeted to mere chance. This stark revelation highlighted the fragility of earlier positive claim. Meanwhile, people like James Randi and other skeptics tirelessly worked to replicate remote viewing under genuinely controlled conditions. Randi's famed debunking efforts, often underscored by his knack for revealing hidden cues and biases, dealt heavy blows to the credibility of psychic research. Schools of eager students, using only transcripts loaded with telltale clues, managed to achieve stunning successes without even looking at targets, exposing the fallacies masked by the original experiments. Arguably, one of the starkest criticisms came from a fellow named Terence Hines, who, after meticulously examining the body of remote viewing research, concluded that supposed psychic successes often crumbled under rigorous, unbiased scrutiny. Adding insult to injury, key studies refuse transparency, withholding crucial transcripts that, once obtained, revealed numerous sensory hints. The chorus of skepticism was further amplified by people like Martin Gardner, who spotlighted Puthoff's background in Scientology, alluding to a red flag for many. Gardner and others illustrated how elements from the Kirky realm of Scientology, including arcane doctrines like those from Madame Blavatsky's occult chemistry, seeped into remote viewing's narrative, blurring the lines between scientific inquiry and mystical ideology. But let's fast forward to the late 20th century. Remote viewing's entanglement with military ambitions, namely the costly beleaguered Stargate project, fueled headlines and conspiracy theories, but ultimately flopped in practical use. Allegations of altering data to match vague intelligence needs only sullied its reputation further. David Marks relentless critique in The Psychology of the Psychic, published 2000, was a nail in the coffin. He laid bare how the Stargate Project's experiments, lacking sensory leakage, controls, and independent replication, were fundamentally flawed. Mark's damning conclusion christened the project a subjective delusion and a lamentable failure to produce any credible scientific evidence supporting remote viewing. As the smoke cleared, voices from the skeptical community grew ever loud, with people like Richard Wiseman, a respected psychologist and skeptic, dissected the methodological shortcomings of early remote viewing experiments. Yet, he notably acknowledged the efforts to refine the process, hinting that researchers were at least attempting to address the past pitfalls. But despite these refinements, the heart of the scientific community remains stalwart in its stance. Remote viewing lacks allegedly reproducible, statistically significant results under controlled conditions. The absence of a coherent theoretical framework only deepens the chasm between proponents and skeptics. The allure of remote viewing, its promise of unseen wonders and psychic capabilities, continues to capture the public's imagination. Yet even today, renowned skeptics like Michael Shermier and science writers such as Martin Gardner reliably debunk every claim, exposing the methodological flaws, sensory cueing issues, and persistent failures to replicate positive results on neutral ground. Shermier's scrutiny of the sketches used in remote viewing trials, often generic and stated open to broad interpretation, brought to light the biases that could influence results. This concept of confirmation bias, wherein ambiguous information is translated in a way that confirms pre-existing beliefs, remains a critical hurdle that remote viewing has not conveyingly overcome, and might I add, overcome in the science community. The decisive critiques by people such as Marx Kamen, who tried and failed to replicate Targ and Pothoff's shockingly optimistic results, set a new gold standard in skepticism. Their discovery of clues influencing outcomes revealed a stark reality. Remove the unwitting cheats, and the mystical veil lifts to reveal nothing more than chance, they alluded. Yet, quiet as is kept, the drama escalates as we delve further into whether remote viewing could ever redeem itself in the eyes of scientific establishments. The perpetual cycle of claim, debunking, and refined methodology continues. But the shadow of doubt remains long and ominous. And so, as we wrap up today's episode, we reflect on remote viewing's captivating journey. Its start, Targ and Pothoff, their work then being dissected within the science community. Rightfully so, right? But I often wonder, is this a case of science versus the supernatural? After all, psychic abilities, to me, infringe on the mystique of the unknown. I would be so interested in understanding how psychics can be evaluated under scientific control measures. And this is no disrespect to the science community at all, because science is about data and factual data, whereas psychic is more mystical, more supernatural and interesting. And does the psychic ability and phenomena even really have quantifiable data? Or are these things that infringe in the supernatural realm? that are mysterious. Either way, I'm excited to get started on part 2. Come back here next Monday at 6 a.m. Part 2 will drop because we are going to dive into the successes of remote viewing and the current people in this day and age that talk about remote viewing. So we're going to get into it. We laid out the foundation. And you know what's interesting about this? And listen, okay, I'm just saying. Okay, what CIA spent a couple of years and some money. They got a heavy bag on this. Is it another MK Ultra? You know what I'm saying? Did you dissolve it? Really? I don't think so. I don't know. The fact that the government took interest in something and it lasted a couple of years and a lot of money was dropped on the project just piques my interest. And here's the other thing. It was said, allegedly, according to lore, that some of the sidekicks they had on payroll during this remote viewing governmental period were paid up towards of $500,000 a year, even after the project was dissolved. Interesting. But join me on part 2. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the successes that it has represented and who the people are that have been known in history and in time to have had these successes through remote viewing. And hey, if you're feeling froggy, try remote viewing. Get a sketch. Start small. Start big.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Memory Chronicles Podcast. Spread the word by sharing your favorite 30 to 60 second clips on your social media. It helps us connect with like-minded listeners like you. We're dropping new episodes every Monday at 6 a.m. Central Time, so set your alarms. Want to support the show? Hit our link tree in the description and buy us a coffee. Every bit helps. Interested in being a guest or curious about Memory's latest book projects? The link tree has all the info you need. Catch us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, our Memory Chronicles. Join our growing community by following, subscribing, liking, and sharing our content. From all of us here, and from Memory, thank you for your time and support. Stay safe, and see you next time.